Recording. Regular Joe here. The old media tends to call me Joseph Gordon-Levitt, that being my name and all. But I go by Regular Joe. I acted in this really fantastic, huge Hollywood movie called Inception. And it's all about dreams. Dreaming is something that's always fascinated me. If we all spend on average like 20 years of our lives asleep, that's about 5-6 years that we all spend dreaming. And man, that's a lot of time that I could be, I could be alive.
We continue going about our days, and sleep to contrive innovative dreams. Anyone who wishes to interpret the dream must himself be on approximately the same level as the dream, for nowhere can he see anything more than what he is himself.
Well, what is exactly going on here when I'm asleep, and why do we dream, and what is it for, and what can I maybe get out of it? I'm hoping that in working on this documentary right now, I can maybe learn a thing or two about dreams.
I got started smoking years ago when I was a young man, and I finally got to the point of almost a chain smoker. And somewhere in the 50s, the Surgeon General announced that cigarettes cause cancer of the lung. I tried to quit. Then I developed a chronic cough that smokers had. One day I was coughing, and I coughed out into a handkerchief. It was pink. And a chain smoker could only mean one thing: cancer of the lung. And that's the death sentence. And the despair I felt, and the self-hatred, I should have quit. I won't see my children grow up. Just incredible despair. And then I woke up. And the dream was so real, I didn't smoke another cigarette. I call it the dream that saved my life, because I probably would have kept smoking.
Freud's dream theory was basically the idea that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. His whole idea was that the unconscious, the tip of the iceberg, is, of course, consciousness, and everything underneath is unconsciousness. He, however, viewed this sort of suppressing this unconscious material is because there's all kinds of unresolved, libidinal, instinctual, yucky stuff down there. We're less likely to see that today. Yes, a whole lot goes on unconsciously, but a lot of it's just a much more efficient way to process information. He brought attention to dreams, put importance on dreams, but he also pathologized them. And that's too bad, because they're not. They're perfectly normal.
He thought that we only dreamed when there was a conflict. And that's one thing that the physiologic research really showed, that Freud was just dead wrong on how often dreams are happening. They're happening with great regularity for everyone, whether we recall them or not.
When we go to sleep, our brain deactivates. Everything goes down on slow running. It's almost like we're hibernating, so to speak. Dreams happen when the brain is reactivated.
Every 90 minutes approximately, the brain becomes much more active, the eyes start moving around like crazy, and that's basically when most dreams occur.
REM sleep is also called paradoxical sleep. It's a good name for it because it's a state of the brain in which the brain is turned on as much as it ever is, but it's detached from the body.
Why then do you see when there's nothing there? How can we explain the fact that you feel like you're moving, even though you're not moving? And the answer is very simple. The brain has a virtual reality generator. It generates sensory stimuli for itself, and it interprets them for itself. This is imagination. This is what this is all about. It's about conscious imagination.
Dr. Stephen LaBerge has a phrase, this 3-pound universe. The brain creates the world, and we're conscious of the world. In REM sleep, we aren't getting any help from the senses. And that, to me, is a miracle.
I see a lot of commonality between just being creative, whether that means, you make movies, or you write songs, you draw, you write, whatever it is. That kind of creativity, I feel like it's very connected to dreaming.
Every night the auburn sun tucks in her children one by one.
Ever since Freud, we've thought that dreaming was an unconscious mental state. It is not unconscious. It is highly conscious, and it is, in fact, a state of consciousness that precedes waking consciousness. Because in development, in utero, you're certainly REMing. We know that fetal states are mostly REM, and obviously the brain is getting ready to be conscious. And you're probably doing something like dreaming, although I'm not suggesting that you're having anything like adult dreams.
If I want to look at the neurological activity, comparing a dream to waking, they're largely the same. Because the brain can't tell the difference between dream input and waking input.
Dreams are as real as waking life. People will wake up and they'll say, I can't believe that was a dream.
I had a dream that I was approaching a kindergarten classroom and I saw rows and rows of desks that were empty and just one little child sitting in the front. As soon as I sat down, the teacher turned around and she had red lights instead of eyes. She said in a really deep voice, "Stop trying to forget the baby." And I looked over at the little kid next to me and it was me.
What's always been interesting to me about dreams and about dreaming is that unlike other forms of psychological distortion, whether it be memory loss or psychosis or hallucinations and so forth, dreaming is a very positive, healthy experience, and it's one in which somebody normal with an ordinary mental process is allowed to view the world in a particularly distorted and surreal way.
And sleep does have that sense of losing control as we spin into sleep, because we are losing control of our quote mind at that particular point.
When I was doing laboratory sleep research, I would stay up all night, so I'd sleep deprive myself. By morning, I was very, very prone to have somebody walk in the door of the lab. There wasn't anybody there. I was hallucinating. I was having sleep-onset hallucinations. Those hallucinations, if I was sleeping normally, would be contained in my dream world. Freud and Jung both said that let the dreamer awake and you will see psychosis. In your dream, you have the capacity of seeing things that aren't there. If, for reason of sleep deprivation, drug taking, or bad genes, you have that dream experience during waking, you will call it psychosis. And that's what psychotic people experience all the time. They experience waking consciousness as if it were dream consciousness. Their waking consciousness is dream consciousness. Every brain has within it a psychotic potential. That doesn't mean it's sick, but every person certainly can become psychotic, and every person does become psychotic every night of their life. It's normal.
When you go into REM sleep, there's basically a part of your brainstem that suppresses muscle tone. When that switches off, we're essentially paralyzed. We can't move.
What you can do is move your eyes. You still have control over that. The function of the paralysis mechanism is so that you can have these emotionally engaging experiences, but be safe.
I've certainly had the experience of still being subject to the paralysis, but actually waking up in the real world. And for an instant or two, you can't move, and that is certainly very frightening.
You know you're paralyzed. You know you're awake. You know you're in your room. You cannot scream out. You cannot move. UFO abductions are often attributed to this disorder. You wake up from a dream and you're breathing hard, and your heart's going, that's REM sleep. If you have an asthma attack, it's out of REM sleep. Stomach acid secretions are up 20 times in REM sleep. So REM sleep is pushing the body while it's paralyzing, and thank God, because when that paralysis mechanism cuts off, people act it out, and that can get dangerous. One of the most famous cases happened where a man had REM sleep disorder.
This is a young man who was very much enamored of a young woman, wanted to marry her, and the parents were opposed to the marriage. This happens in reality. So she starts to act nervous and shy, and he realizes he's going to lose her. So he's a sleepwalker. He's been a sleepwalker all his life. So he's going home in his car, and he hears on the radio that these two people have been killed with a hammer. And he says, I wonder if I did that. Because the two people are the parents of his girlfriend. Okay? So he calls the cops and he says, you know, I'm really worried about these people. I think I might have done this thing. How could you do this? You weren't awake? Well, he says, no, and his defense for the jury is that he was sleepwalking the whole time. 30-mile drive in the car, bludgeons them to death with a hammer, gets out of the house, goes back home, and hears the report on the radio. The jury found him not guilty by reason of sleepwalking and automatic behavior. He got off. Because the law states that you have to have conscious will and you have to be in control. Attorneys questioned them and said, could he have done this thing in his sleep without knowing it? And the answer is yes.
I find that literally trying to recall dreams or trying to relate the dream experience, I find that to be really impossible. It's such a subjective and personal experience. It's very difficult to translate it into words and have somebody else be able to follow it. Which is one of the reasons I was interested to make a film that would try and portray dream states.
Even back in the early non-talkies, it seems like almost every special effect that came along got tried out. Just the feeling that something is happening that couldn't quite happen in waking life is what these things seem to conjure up.
Over the years, people have tried dissolves or they've tried more surreal transitions, but I think the simple cut in film grammar is one of the closest film tricks to the way the brain actually thinks, to the way you actually perceive the world. We've tried to really push the limits of how you can use cuts, how you can use the most simple cinematic transition areas to take the audience from literally one state of mind into another state of mind.
Taking on the challenge of doing a film that's set within a dream state, it wasn't that far off for me from what making movies is, if that makes any sense. We all have to take on a sort of alternate reality and put ourselves in different character shoes and sort of be in different environments that are a dream every time we make a movie.
For me, one of the key components of dreaming is that you don't feel yourself enter the dream. You can feel yourself come out of it. You can very specifically wake from the dream and know exactly at what point in the dream you've woken from it. But for me personally, I would never feel myself entering that state in a conscious way. And so in portraying dreams and the entry into dreams in the film, it was very important to me to try and really do it the way it felt. And the way it feels to me is that you find yourself in the middle of a situation, in the middle of an environment. And then as the experience ends, you become aware of where you are physically in the world above the dream, if you like. And so the way we portray the entry into dreams is we throw the audience into the middle of an experience, and then they become oriented through coming out of the dream.
When we look at the dream life of people in general, the emotions are mostly negative. They are mostly sadness, fear, most of all apprehension or anxiety, and we'll throw in confusion, puzzlement. And that's another reason why I say we tend to dream worst-case scenarios.
There's certainly some fairly common dream themes.
The recurring dream that I have the most, which is a classic universal dream, is anxiety about schoolwork and being back in high school and not having done any of the coursework for an exam, but having to take that exam.
And the classic experience is falling and waking up before you hit bottom.
I went to school and I suddenly realized that I'm only wearing my underwear and everyone else is fully clothed.
Half or more of people will say, I've had that dream at least once. A dream of being in public, inappropriately dressed, of their teeth falling out, a dream of flying under their own power.
Bad dreams are very common. Anger, attack dreams are very common.
One evolutionary theory is that dreaming helps us to practice